Hi. A couple of months ago I made an entry into a game jam going by the name of 7-Day RTS, in which you were supposed to make an RTS game in 7 days and bring some kind of innovation to the genre. I made a pretty basic RTS game and I've been working on it for about 5 weeks since then, so this is just to explain how to play the game as it exists today, and I couldn't be bothered writing any documentation, so I'm going to explain it in video. And the gimmick of the game is basically supply lines. So you need to, as you move your army forward across the map, you need to keep them supplied and place supply points along the map and protect your supply lines. So when you start up the program, you'll be looking at this screen here, and you can create a random terrain by clicking one of these two buttons here that say New Terrain. The one at the top here, Use Seed, will let you recreate the same terrain every time. So you can type a number in here and it will give you the exact same terrain based on that random seed. There's a couple of things up here. Terrain Scale will let you make, I forget whether making it smaller it makes it flatter and broader terrain, or making it larger, I can't remember, but you can just play around with this number a bit to make the terrain more compact and bumpy or more stretched out and flat. Water level is approximate percentage of the map that will be covered by water. All water is completely boring, and no water is also kind of boring as well, so I find about 50% is quite good. So I'll just create a random terrain like this, and this will take about 6 to 8 seconds, maybe, depending on what sort of CPU you have or how many cores your computer has. Okay, so here we can see the terrain that was generated, and it's rotationally symmetrical, so you won't be able to get any advantage over your enemy because of the terrain. And we can see here, if we turn off the fog of war, we can get a look at the lighting and the terrain contours here. So the red lines are higher terrain points, and the white lines going down to the shoreline are lower terrain. The fog of war being on means that none of your units can see these areas at the moment, so you'll be playing with it on most of the time. And you can hit the V key to see, hitting V turns this off and on, and that lets you see which parts of the terrain are visible from the point that the mouse is currently over. So if I hold the mouse in this sort of this inlet here, or this bay, we can see that because there are hills up behind this bay, we can't see down to the lower left direction, but we can see, we can see all the way out into the ocean. So in the ocean everything's flat, we can see everything. So like this. So this is a good way to figure out where you might want to place units. If you want your units to be able to see a long distance, they'd be on the top of the hill like this. If they want to hide, they'd be probably somewhere a little bit more like this. And that's the V key. And you can zoom in and out with the mouse wheel, and it should zoom into the place where you have the mouse cursor. And you can hit the home key to bring the whole map, at least vertically it will be just inside the boundaries of the window. And when you're done with setting up your terrain, you can just press the escape key to hide this window. Of course, you might want to also click Reset Units, which will give you something to play the game with. So I'll just click that now, and we can see over there in the far left we have our army, which is the light blue army, and the enemy will start on the far left, and he's going to have red colors. One thing to be careful of is if you click this again, it will wipe everything back to the starting state, so just be careful of that, or I guess if you're playing you'll be having that panel closed anyway. Okay, so let's look at how we can move these units around. And I should also mention that you can use the right mouse button to pan the scene like that. Okay, so looking at the unit types here, there are only 4 types of units, and you don't get to create any new units, so you'll have to look after the ones that you get given at the start. So there's no construction or base building. Well, there's kind of base building, but there's no unit building. Alright, so starting from the left here, we have a Jeep unit, and you can select units with the left mouse button just by clicking on them or by dragging a box like that, and you can add units to the selection by holding the shift key, and you can remove them from the selection or toggle them by holding the control key while you click them. And the units that are selected, just ignore that please. That's the enemy scout. And the units that are selected will be shown, the text will show here the hit points and their status, and also the visibility and attack range circles around them, and this little rotating green square will show as well. So starting from this Jeep unit on the left, this is a scout, and it moves a little bit faster than the other 3 units here, which all move at the same speed. And the scout has a visibility range of this little faint white circle here. All of the units, as you can see, have the same visibility range, and the scout cannot attack, so you would use this just to sort of see what the enemy is doing, and you get 2 of those to start with. The next unit over here is what I'm calling infantry. These icons are largely arbitrary because all of these units can travel on water and land just as happily as they can travel on water just as happily as they can on land, although there is a large penalty for crossing between water and land. So you could think of the penalty as the time that it takes to load these units onto a boat. So just imagine that wherever they need to get on the water, they can get on the water, but it will take a long time, so there's a trade-off. Anyway, so the infantry, you can see he has an orange circle around here, which is his attack radius, and the tank, which, like I say, just ignore the fact that it's a tank and it's driving on the water. The icons are largely just to let you identify the units. It's not really important whether it's a tank or a man or a jeep. But I thought these were quite relevant icons, because the main difference between these 3 units on the right here is their attack range. They all have the same damage per second, and they all have the same visibility range. The only thing that's different is the orange circle here, which is their attack range. So infantry can only attack things from a very close distance. The tank units are, I think, 5 times further away they can attack to, and the artillery over here can actually attack twice as far as it can see, which means that even if it can't see what's out here, if you can get another unit like a scout or an infantry or something to go over here and see what's there, then the artillery can attack it from a distance. What else is there to say about these? So the damage per second, like I say, is the same, but the flight time of their projectiles is all the same as well, which means that, let me just demonstrate. So if I tell this artillery to attack this point here, I can do that by hitting the D key for direct fire. So we can see that it doesn't fire very often, but it can fire very far, so I can make it fire all the way over to where the mouse is now. And because the damage per second is the same, each one of these hits is very damaging. So tank, if I make him fire upwards, you can see he's firing a lot faster with a smaller area of effect. And infantry is the same. So okay, be quiet. Yeah, so like I say, damage per second is the same, but the biggest difference between them is the range that they have available to fire within. And the hit points beside them, this little bar here, is the hit points or the health of this unit, and they all have the same number of hit points, except for the scout, which is a little bit weaker, but he's faster, so he's harder to hit. And these hit points, as we can see here, are very, very slowly deteriorating, and these hit points are symbolic of the general supply status of the unit, so how much food and fuel this unit has. And I guess if you wanted to think of this as infantry, you could say, well, if this is also the number of people that are in this unit as well. So it's decreasing at a rate of, I think, something like I can't remember what it was, but it was like 0.1% of his health every minute, or 1% of his health every minute, or something like that. So after a half an hour or something, he will be dead. When this gets to 0, though, he doesn't die, he just stops moving. He can still attack, but he will need some supplies to start moving again. So the whole thing about supplies and supply points is a very important part of the game. Okay, so next let's look at moving these units. When you first start off, your units will be in this kind of arrangement, and you move the units by selecting them and clicking the right mouse button where you want them to move. And you can queue movements by holding down the shift key and clicking further waypoints along where you want them to move. It will show you here in the text a rough time for when they're going to arrive. That's very rough, don't worry about that too much. You'll notice that each one of these points, as I create it, has a circle on it at the point. That actually allows me to drag those waypoints to a different location. So I can sort of drag this around and be mean to this Jeep and not let him get to where he's going. Oops. And you can also drag from any point along the line to add more waypoints to it, like this. And as a special case, when you're dragging the last waypoint in the list, if you hit tab, that will switch between adding it, simply moving that waypoint, or let's give this guy some more work to do. It will switch between simply moving it or actually adding it to the end of the list. So if I drag the end waypoint and hit tab, it will actually add another one. So this is handy in situations where you're looking at something way on the other side of the map like this, and you don't actually have that unit selected to move. You can mouse over, and the mouse over icon will show me that this is for the Jeep, and it will let me put more waypoints into this path without having to go over here and find the Jeep to select him. Alright, so that's waypoints. And when you have more than one unit selected, they will all go to the same place, and when they get there they will sort of spread out a little bit like that, just so that they don't all stand in one spot. And you can also, if you hold down the control key while using the right mouse button to drag, you can place the units in a line like this. You can draw a line and they'll all go to the closest point. Well, it's not actually the closest point, it's the set of points. They'll pick their destination so that overall they're moving the shortest distance possible, like this. And you can also use the shift key when you're doing that. So I could say everybody should go here, and then if I hold down control and shift I can draw a line to make them go like that, and then control and shift again, and I can sort of make them turn around like this, and then just shift only one more time, and then that will bring them together in the same spot at the end of this list of waypoints. So this is quite a versatile way of getting your units into a formation and yeah, setting them up to cover nice, like you might want to set them up to cover the shoreline of your island or something like that. It makes it a quite easy way to do that. Right, okay, we have this panel up here which will, when I have something selected, I'll just select all those guys again, and we can see by mousing over the sub-tabs on the left we can see a couple of buttons for that particular unit. This is a bit unclear because, okay, let me choose an infantry and a tank. Now we can see we have infantry and tank here, and I can tell them to individually, say if I choose the infantry and I tell him to pause movement, he'll stop moving, and if I click that again he'll start moving. So I can individually tell each unit to start and stop moving and firing. And at the top here we have controls for the entire selection, so I can say that all units should unpause their movement. So let's pause and unpause. So this can be handy also if you don't want them to fire at a certain time. All units will automatically fire at the closest enemy, which sometimes you might not want to give away the position, especially of your artillery, which is quite important. You only have 2 of those. Oh yeah, I should have mentioned you get 12 infantry, 4 tanks, and 2 artillery and 2 scouts is the units that you start the game with. Right. Now, when moving over land, the contours of the terrain become important. So if I select this jeep here and I tell him to move here, we can see there is a hill here. This is the hilltop, and it's cheaper to go around that hill than to go over the top and down again. So this will be taken into account when pathfinding for the units is done. And we can see as we move around to the other side of the hill, when we get around it we suddenly be able to see what is on this side of the hill. So that's why it's important to, for example here I could take this high ground and then I'll be able to see down onto this area of the water as well. So like I said, some spots are good for being visible or getting visibility, and some spots are good for hiding. The path that's taken should be the cheapest between the 2 points. It's not always perfect, but it's pretty good, and you'll be able to see by the color tint of the path here. If it's darker orange, this is going to be a slower area, because right here we can see it's covering 2 contour levels. So the idea with this is that going up and down hills is slower than going along flat areas. And this bit here is a paler yellow, which signifies that that will be a faster part of the path. So we should see that when the Jeep gets there it goes a little bit faster, although it's a little bit hard to tell there. It wasn't too much of a difference. But this will become important obviously for getting around, and also for choosing places where your supply lines should go so that they don't get bogged down in slow parts too often. As far as the travelling over water is concerned, like we were just looking at, most of the time that can be done in straight lines like this. And as I said, all of these units can quite happily go from land to water and back again. So I'll select this guy here and I can send him up onto the land, and that's no trouble at all. But we'll see that when he gets to this point here, he stops in his tracks, and another little bar beside the health bar, we can see now a yellow bar, and that's slowly going down. And this takes, I think, 30 seconds, and what this signifies is that he is being unloaded from a ship or something. And when the yellow bar is fully depleted, that means he's on land. And when he's going the other way, when he's going into the water, you'll see this yellow bar increasing. So any second now we should see that he now moves to where he was going to go on land. So that obviously can be a very important thing to take into account when you're moving things around. You don't want to get stuck in a position where the enemy can see you trying to get up onto this beachhead, because you're just going to be sitting there for a long time and they can just sit and they can just shoot at you. And also means that it'll become very important where you put these supply points, as I'll get to a little bit later, because these actually have the effect of reducing the time it takes to cross between water and land. Anyway, so back to what I was going to say about this pathfinding. Because it's so expensive to cross between water and land, if I, for example, choose this Jeep and I tell him to go all the way up here, he'll go around, because it's much cheaper to go all the way around than it is to come in here and do at least two water crossings. Plus, because the surface of the water is completely flat, it's cheaper than crossing all these terrain contours. So the cost of travelling on water is a fair bit cheaper. Okay. Right, that's the basics of the units all covered. Next thing we need to look at is these supply points here, because this is kind of the whole gimmick of the game, how you manage these as part of the strategy. Okay, so when you start the game, when you reset your units, you may have noticed that their health bars are only half full. So this is where the balance comes in between trying to rush ahead towards the enemy's territory and claim ground, and making sure that your army is strong and healthy and capable and so on. So this thing here is a supply point, and this is like your home supply point, and this will continuously be restocked from off the battlefield, so you don't have to actually go and collect anything. It will always be replenished at the rate of 2 hit points per second. So at the moment it's full at 100. It caps at a maximum of 100, and you can set this target here, which is kind of irrelevant for this point, but we'll look at it in a little bit more detail for other supply points. So the thing about supply points, what they do is when your units, say this guy here is hit points 8.49 out of 20, when he steps inside this purple circle of the supply point, the supply point will restock his hit points at the rate of, I think, 1 per second. And you can see the stock going down a little bit here, but it's also being replenished quickly as well, so it doesn't really have too much effect here. So this supply point here, you can pretty much, you never really have to worry about this running out. It's basically just an endless supply of supply. But as you move across the map, it will become important to organize how your other points are laid out. So as far as laying out supply points goes, you can select the supply point, and I'll put another one say here, and you can only place these on land, and you do this with the middle mouse button like so. And from the one that I selected, you need to have one single supply point selected when you do this. So you select just the one, no other units, and then you click the middle mouse button somewhere else, and that will automatically place a path between them, and it will start sending supply trucks. Once again, I'm calling them trucks, but they can go on the water as well, just like the other units, and they'll travel here to this other supply point, which has stock of 0 at the moment, and it has, the supply will go up as these supply trucks arrive. And when we've selected a supply point, we'll see in the panel up in the top left, we have a minimum and a maximum supply stock that we are trying to target. So we want to keep at least 10 units of stock at this point. That means that if I, it's a little bit late now, but if I had moved this infantry inside the supply circle before this supply point reached 10 stock, nothing would happen, because it's not going to give him anything until it's reached its minimum supply stock level. Now that it's at 14, we should be able to move him in here and get some supply. And we'll see that because the supply is now arriving a little bit slower from the other supply point, we probably will stop in a minute, because we're getting down to our limit of 10. And when we hit, oh no, it's coming in pretty fast, isn't it? Okay, this is okay. Now see that I'm gonna have to do this with somebody else. Hold on, tank's coming. The green line signifies that the supply demand is being met. When the line is orange, as it will be in a minute, oh, come on. Okay, so the lines going orange there means that these units are demanding more from the supply point than it is able to give them, just briefly. But because we're still so close to the incoming, like the route supply point, it's not having too much trouble here. Okay, so as I mentioned before, the supply points have another very important feature, and that is that any units crossing from the land to the water within this purple circle will have the water crossing cost reduced by the number of hit points that are currently in stock in this supply point, up to a maximum of 10. So that means that if there's 1 stock here, nothing will change. If there's 2 stock here, that will mean that the water crossing time is halved. If there's 3 stock, the water crossing time is divided by 3, up to a maximum of 10. So at the moment we have 26 stock, which means that up to a maximum of 10 means that when I try and make this infantry cross into the water, the normal water crossing time of 30 seconds will be divided by 10, so it will actually only take him... Oh, you would do that, wouldn't you? Alright. The pathfinding is a little bit funny when you get to this small scale. If I try and cross him into the water here, we should see that it only takes 3 seconds, and the yellow bar will fill up in 3 seconds, and it's much much quicker to get your units into and out of the water. So this will be another very important point when you're deciding where to put these, because if you put a supply point, for example, in a place like this, well, obviously it doesn't matter in this particular case because we can drive around the water here, but if this was a narrow land bridge between larger sections of land, it would become a very important place because we could quickly transfer our units from the ocean on one side through the land into the ocean on the other side in around about 6 seconds instead of the normal 1 minute that it would take otherwise. So you can make these points anywhere you like, and as many of them as you like, but of course they're not very useful until the supply trucks arrive and make them worthwhile. And you also should not, ideally, even though you can, for example, I can make a whole bunch out here, but it's not a very good idea unless you have your army there to guard over them and make sure that you're not just sending the supply out for your enemy to grab. And the lines that are drawn between these points can be dragged and given waypoints. Oops, something went wrong there. What happened? Oh. Can be dragged and given waypoints just the same as you do for all of the other combat units. So you might want to do this, for example, if you wanted to approach this supply point here from this direction, and you wanted to make it go a little bit longer just in case the enemy was scouting in this area. You wanted to hide your supply line approach from them, you could do it like that. And it also becomes important to make sure that when you have a land-sea connection supply point like this one, you want to make sure that the supply routes are actually crossing into the water inside this purple circle so that they will get the benefit of this water crossing time reduction. So all of the supply trucks, these little purple dots that are traveling along the supply lines, they also are affected by the reduced water crossing time within the supply point range. Oh, and something is... Okay, I don't know if you can hear that in the video, but I can't see it, but the enemy is around here somewhere and they are shooting my supply trucks. So even though I have no control over these individual supply truck units, they are shootable by the enemy, so you can sabotage the enemy's supply lines by shooting these purple dots, and each one of these dots is 1 unit. So you might, depending on what kind of strategy you're doing, you might want to actually not kill them. You might want to let the enemy load up this supply point with stock, and then you can just walk in and take it. So the way the supply point takeover works is whichever army has one of their units in the supply point and no other army has a unit in there. Hang on, let me start again. If you can get one of your units inside the enemy's supply point circle and they don't have any of their units in there, then this supply point will become yours. And what happens then is that any of the enemy's incoming supply trucks that would have headed into here will turn around and go back, and you get to keep all of the stock that they had there. So that's why I'm saying you might not always want to attack the supply route. You might want to let them pump up their supply point with stock and then race in and try and take it for yourself. And if things are going bad for you in a certain area and you have too much stock in one supply point, you can I can actually, by holding the mouse over the supply line here, I can actually delete it. It doesn't affect any of the trucks that were already en route to that supply point, but it will stop any further trucks from going to that supply point. And if you're really worried, you might also want to start shooting your own supply point just to make sure that the enemy doesn't get it. Sort of a scorched earth retreat sort of a thing, I guess. So as you can see here, the supply points and the supply trucks, they don't have any visibility. So the fog of war is completely covering this area because I haven't been sensible and sent any of my combat units over there to guard this area. So like I say, although you can expand as quick as you like with these supply points, you know, it's probably not a very clever thing to do most of the time. And I think I'm just about finished explaining these, but one other thing you can do is you can select existing supply points. If you have more than one selected and you hit the middle mouse button, this will connect the two that you've selected. Actually, it will connect all of them, so this is probably not a good idea either, but if I select all four of these and hit the middle mouse button, we'll see that we get a whole bunch of connections between them. And they will, the way this minimum and maximum target works is if they have any neighbors, if their neighboring supply points need supply more than they do, they will send a unit of supply towards them. It's a little bit more sensible than that. Each supply point, once it detects that it has enough incoming to supply its demand, it doesn't ask for any more. So none of these trucks are wasted. And when you move units into a supply point, it acts as basically it temporarily increases this maximum target for the time that unit wants more supply. A little bit hard to explain in a video, I think, but yeah, you can set these to 0 if you want to clear it out, and set it to a high number as you move, you know, advance towards the enemy and you want to have a stronger base of support here. What else? I think that's about it, really. Oh yeah, you can use the spacebar to pause the game, I should have mentioned as well. Not sure what's going on over here. It's a bit hard to see. You can't see, obviously you can't see the enemy units under the fog of war, and you also can't see bullets being fired, but you can see the explosions that explode when the bullets hit. Alright, anyway, so at the moment, yeah, I should have mentioned right at the beginning of the video, but at the moment there's no multiplayer, which is a bit of a shame because the AI, although I did put some work into making a little bit of AI for the enemy army, it's still not very good. And it's the kind of thing that's kind of tricky to actually make a sensible AI for, because so much of this assessing the terrain and deciding what's a good place to put supply points and stuff like that is quite hard for a computer to figure out, I think. So the only thing that the AI does at the moment is it will gradually expand its way across the map, and it doesn't really attack you, and it doesn't really run away when you attack it. Although it's obviously each unit knows to shoot at enemies when it sees them. So yeah, it's not a whole lot of fun to play, to be honest, at the moment. I'm not sure if I'll work on this anymore, but I think it would be quite fun to play, although a little bit slow maybe for most people's tastes. But it would be quite fun to play as multiplayer. So a little bit more about how you control the units. You can the four keys A, S, D, F all have a function. So let's see what can we do here. I'll select this tank, and if I hit the A key while I'm moused over another unit, what's going on over there? Let me just stop those, get rid of all these. It's getting annoying. Like, I'm wearing headphones and it's really loud. Okay, sorry. So if I select this tank and then mouse over another unit and hit A, the tank will move to a point where he can attack that unit from and then start shooting it. So if I select this guy and hit A, or if I mouse over this guy rather and hit A, we'll see that the tank goes to the closest point to that unit and then starts firing. Oh, and we have a visitor. Okay, that's gonna. I might just reset these units because it's going to be distracting. Alright, let's start again. Okay, so that's A. The A key will attack like that, and you can cancel that by just making a movement. The S key will suppress an area, so A is for attack, S is for suppress, and once again, if I hold the mouse cursor somewhere and I hit S, this unit will suppress that area, which means it just fires to shoot, to land some shots in a random area around that location. So this can be handy in the case where you think you saw something in this location and you're not exactly sure, but you just want to maybe try and hit it even if you can't see it. So that's suppress. D is direct fire, and that will just fire directly at where the mouse cursor is, like this. And follow, so this is F. If I tell this guy to go here and then here and then here and then here, and then I select these three guys and I mouse over him and hit F, they will follow him. So you can see they're continuously updating their path to follow that guy. Not very useful actually, but it was just sort of an exercise in using AngelScript to get these things to work. I think I've pretty much covered everything now. What I might do for the rest of the video, if you're still here, is I'll just play through one game, or maybe just the first part of a game, and show a typical case of how you might expand these supply lines and move forwards here and try and kill some enemies. So I'll set this water level back to 50, which I like 50. It's makes some interesting islands and features and rivers and stuff. Okay, and I'll see you in a second. Okay, looking at this map here, obviously the quickest way to get to most of the way across the other side of the map is through this little stretch of water here, so I just want to sort of keep an eye on that area and make sure nothing's coming through there without me noticing. And I don't know, what should I do with this guy? There's a bunch of hills there too. In fact, I might try and put this guy right on this hill here where he can get a good look. Actually, I can't really see too well there, can he? Alright, that'll do. So you can go there. And I don't want to move these guys around continuously, because moving increases the rate at which their HP decreases. So I think it's 2% of their total HP per minute versus 1% when they're standing still. Okay, now I know that the enemy AI is not going to be here just yet, but I'll keep this here just in case. Now I want to get things moving pretty quickly towards this island, and I want to have a point here that's not too visible. I think this is the point that we looked at the beginning of the game, beginning of the video, wasn't it? So I'll select this supply point and I'll put another supply point there, and then from here I can queue these up before I even get anybody over there, because let's put this other one here. So it's not really a danger to do this early because there's no supply trucks coming over just yet. Now this supply route that's been chosen here is not the best one, because I know that if I grab this supply route here and make it go into this section of my my port here, it's going to be much quicker to get into the water. So it'll only take 3 seconds to cross the water barrier there. So unfortunately these trucks here are going to take much longer to get to the destination than these ones will. When these first trucks arrive here, it's going to be quite slow, because the first one to arrive will take 30 seconds, the next one will take 15 seconds, and so on. Oh, and I better yeah, so I'll select all of my guys that are on the land, and I'll use my brain and I'll make sure that they go here and then here. Oh no. Here and then here, and then I should be safe to move everybody over there. So I'm holding down shift when I do this, and that will make sure that all of those guys that were on land come through this port crossing here, so they only take 3 seconds to get into the water instead of 30. And for everybody else who's already on the water, I might just put them sort of around here, except, and then I'll take a couple of those to be in there. And why not make one of them go all the way in here and stand on this hill there. Yes, that's a good one. You don't actually need this waypoint anymore. Oh, you can delete waypoints by hitting the delete key when they're highlighted. So many things to tell you, and I just skipped over a whole bunch of them, didn't I? Alright, I wouldn't be this aggressive with a human opponent, but it's pretty safe to say that the AI at the moment is no further than at least this coast, at most this coast here, I would guess. Actually, you know what, I should probably be putting this guy where he can see something over there, shouldn't I? Because he's kind of boxed in. Alright. Okay, I should say that the combat units of the AI... Oh no, he just walked into my supply station and took it over. So you saw there that even though the AI is kind of dumb, it just happened to wander through my supply point and take it over, so I lost it. So that would not have happened if I had one of my men in there. So let's put somebody in there just to make sure that doesn't happen again. In fact, while we're at it, why not move all of these guys into here and then over here and then... Oh yes, what's he doing? You go over there. Oh wow, okay. I think we're going to get quite lucky here because we have our artillery in range of this guy who's trying to make a beachhead on this land, and he's just going to get wiped out. It would be nice to keep those guys in vision. Oh man. Okay. As you can see, the artillery is quite an important thing. It's kind of like the queen on this chessboard, if you want to think of it that way. So I want to keep it in range of is it 2 artillery? This is kind of a bit of a bummer actually. Oh no, it's only 1. Oh, I've got 2 stop points here. Oh well. The way the targeting works is it will try and fire at a point a little bit ahead of the unit as it's moving, but it only updates the target point every half a second, so it can be a little bit off. This one is going to be a dead ringer, a dead bullseye. I think it's pretty good. Now we can see this guy is heading into the artillery range, but okay, that's good. Yep. So we don't really need to do much about that because the artillery should take care of it. And I don't want to stand my guys down here because they'll get shot by the artillery as well. Yep, he's dead. Okay, let's see if we can move those guys over there. And I might just move him back here because he could use a bit of a resupply, and this one as well. Who else have we got? Oh, we've got some tanks here that we didn't even move them. Alright, so they can come in here, and then they'll go there, and then they'll go there and there. And these guys can go, actually they can go in here as well. Alright, well, I think you get the idea. Yeah, so like I say, it's a bit dull with just this kind of dumb AI opponent, but it's a lot better than it was 5 weeks ago, and like I say, I don't know if I'll be doing any more work on it, but perhaps one day in the distant future, if it could be made multiplayer, it would probably be kind of fun. Anyway, you can get this at my site, and I'll put a link in the description, and it's available for Linux 64 and 32-bit, also Windows and Mac, but it has some bugs. There's a kind of a rare crash bug that can just happen sort of any time, unfortunately, as much as I hate to say it. That tends to be on Linux 32-bit, at least on Fedora 14. I saw that. I haven't seen it on other OSs hardly at all. And also on Mac there is a problem in which this fog of war doesn't show properly, so it will be, you can turn it off and see everything like that, or of course you can't see the enemy because they're hidden by the program, but the rendering doesn't display these cutout lines of visibility properly, so it will just be all grayed out, all blacked out with the fog of war, unfortunately. But you can still play the game a little bit. Alright, this video is way too long already, so yeah, check out the link in the description and give it a try, and thank you for watching.